The helicopter descended through swirling winter clouds, revealing a terrible geometry below. 47 rectangular concrete foundations stretched across the valley floor in perfect rows, each one covered with a thin layer of snow. From above, it looked like a modern cemetery, precise, ordered, and utterly empty of life. Eleanor Pierce watched the haunting landscape materialize through the helicopter window, silver hair whipping across her face as the aircraft tilted. Her gloved hand pressed against the cold glass, as if trying to reach back through time. "I promised him I'd never come here," she whispered, her breath fogging the window. After 20 years of marriage and 3 days of widowhood, she was finally breaking her sacred vow to Thomas. "Do you, Eleanor Margaret Chambers, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The memory washed over her like warm summer rain, so at odds with the winter landscape below. Their wedding day 20 years earlier had been picture perfect, an intimate ceremony on a snow-covered hillside outside Boston. Thomas had looked at her with those kind brown eyes that first captured her heart at the university library, where she worked as a literature professor. Snowflakes caught in his dark hair as they exchanged vows. "I do," she had said, meaning every syllable. They'd built a life in their cozy timber home on the outskirts of Boston. Thomas's architectural firm flourished, designing sustainable buildings across the country. Every evening, he would sit by the fireplace in their library, surrounded by books and his collection of architectural models, sketching ideas while Eleanor graded papers. The Sydney Opera House model had always been his favorite, prominently displayed on the oak bookshelf Thomas had built himself. Every month when Thomas would pack a small bag and say, "I need to check on some investments," Eleanor would kiss him goodbye without a word about where he was going. Their marriage had been filled with love, respect, and apparently secrets she never thought to question, until 3 days ago, when Thomas hadn't returned from his morning run. Eleanor had found him herself, following his familiar trail through the snow-covered woods behind their home. His body lay peaceful in the fresh powder, no signs of struggle. Heart failure, the doctors had said, natural causes. He was only 68. The funeral had been a blur of black coats and murmured condolences. Olivia, Eleanor's younger sister, had stayed by her side, a steady presence as Eleanor nodded mechanically at stories about Thomas's generosity, his brilliant mind, his kind heart. Mrs. Pierce, a tall man with wire-rimmed glasses, had approached at the reception. "Franklin Reynolds, I was your husband's attorney. When you're ready, we need to discuss some urgent matters regarding his estate." Now alone in Thomas's home office the night after the funeral, Eleanor sat at his desk, a single lamp casting shadows across the polished wood. She'd found the journal accidentally while searching for insurance papers. Bound in worn leather, its pages were filled with Thomas's precise architect's handwriting. Coordinates, dates, names she didn't recognize, and cryptic notes that made no sense. On the final page, dated just 2 weeks earlier, he'd written, "If anything happens to me, E must know the truth. Coordinates to primary facility 44.763 degree N 107.290 degree W. The key is in the Sydney Opera House. Have you ever kept a significant secret for someone you love? Sometimes what we don't know protects us in ways we cannot imagine. Share your thoughts in the comments below." Eleanor's hands trembled as she walked to the bookshelf where Thomas kept his architectural models. The Sydney Opera House had always been his favorite. She lifted it carefully, turning it over to find a small compartment she'd never noticed before. Inside was a simple USB drive. Her laptop hummed to life, the screen illuminating her tear-stained face as she inserted the drive. A single video file appeared. Thomas's face filled the screen, his expression grave. "Eleanor, my love," he began, his familiar voice sending a wave of grief through her chest. "If you're watching this, something has happened to me. I've spent 20 years keeping a promise to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Now I need to ask you to break your promise to me. You need to go to Pinewood Ranch. Everything is explained there. But you must hurry. There are people who will try to erase what I've built." The video ended abruptly. Eleanor sat motionless, staring at the frozen image of her husband's face. Was this the same man who had read poetry to her by the fireplace? Who had spent 20 years sharing her bed, her dreams, her life? Her phone buzzed with a text message from a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Pierce, this is Franklin Reynolds. Urgent matters have come up regarding Wyoming property. Sentinel Environmental Services filing for immediate cleanup operation beginning Monday. Please call immediately." Today was Friday. Whatever Thomas had been protecting was about to be erased in less than 72 hours. Franklin Reynolds' office overlooked downtown Boston, city lights twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows, snowflakes swirling beyond the glass. Despite the late hour, the attorney had agreed to meet Eleanor immediately. "Mrs. Pierce, I apologize for texting you so late," he said, removing his glasses. "Normally, I'd give you time to grieve, but circumstances are pressing." "Mr. Reynolds," Eleanor said, her voice stronger than she felt, "I just watched a video from my husband suggesting that his death might not have been an accident. I'd like some straight answers." The attorney's face tightened. "Your husband maintained unusual legal arrangements regarding Pinewood Ranch. The property technically belongs to a trust with you as the sole beneficiary, but with conditions." "What kind of conditions?" "To gain control of the property, you must personally visit the main facility within 7 days of his death and enter a specific code into the security system. The code changes daily." He slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "Today's is in this envelope. If you don't complete this task by Wednesday at midnight, control of the property defaults to Sentinel Environmental Services." Eleanor studied the attorney's face. "There's more, isn't there?" Reynolds pulled out another document. "Your husband had a $73 million life insurance policy. The beneficiary is you, with specific instructions that a portion be used to maintain Pinewood Ranch." $73 million? Eleanor felt the room tilt slightly. "That's impossible. I would have known." "The policy was purchased through one of his business entities. Very few people knew about it." Reynolds looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Pierce, I've been your husband's attorney for 15 years. In that time, I've learned not to ask too many questions about Pinewood Ranch. Thomas was adamant about protecting whatever is there." Back home, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She prowled through Thomas's office, searching for clues. In the back of his closet, behind rows of tailored suits, she found a locked cabinet she'd never noticed before. The key hung in plain sight among his everyday keys, distinguished only by a small black dot. And inside the cabinet were 3 encrypted phones, a stack of medical textbooks with highlighted passages, and architectural blueprints for what appeared to be underground structures. A folder labeled Sentinel contained newspaper clippings about industrial accidents and corporate settlements. Most disturbing was a notebook filled with what looked like medical data, heart rates, medication dosages, and technical specifications for something called cardiac implant remote access protocols. Thomas had circled certain entries in red with question marks and the word vulnerable scrawled in the margins. Dawn was breaking when Eleanor's phone rang. It was Olivia. "Ellie, are you all right? I've been worried sick." "I'm fine, Liv," Eleanor said, her voice hollow. "Just discovering things about Thomas I never knew." "Like what?" "He had secrets. Big ones." A pause. "Is this about his monthly trips? I always thought they were strange." "You never said anything." "What was I supposed to say?" "Hey, I think your perfect husband might be hiding something." "You were happy, Ellie." "I was," Eleanor's voice caught. "But now I don't know what to believe. What are you going to do?" Eleanor looked at the evidence spread across the floor. the blueprint of a place she'd promised never to visit, the encrypted phones, the mysterious medical notes. "I'm going to Wyoming today. I'm coming with you." "No." Eleanor's tone left no room for argument. "This is something I need to do alone. But I need a favor. I need you to find someone who can fly me to a remote ranch." An hour later, Olivia texted with a name: Gabriela Morales, a helicopter pilot who specialized in mountain terrain. "She's expecting your call. Be careful, Ellie." The small municipal airport outside Sheridan, Wyoming, bustled with weekend activity, mostly tourists heading into the mountains for winter activities. Eleanor stood beside her single suitcase, scanning the tarmac for her pilot. After a sleepless flight from Boston, exhaustion tugged at her, but determination pushed it aside. "Mrs. Pierce," a woman in her late 50s approached. Her weathered face spoke of years in the sun, and her dark eyes held a weariness that seemed to match Eleanor's own. "Gabriela Morales, your sister said you need to reach Pinewood Ranch." Eleanor nodded. "Thank you for agreeing to this on such short notice." Janet mentioned it was urgent. Gabriela studied her with unconcealed curiosity. "That's private property, restricted airspace. Technically, my husband owned it. He died 3 days ago." "I'm sorry for your loss," Gabriela hesitated. "The name Pierce. Was your husband Thomas Pierce, the architect?" "Yes. Did you know him?" "No, but—" Gabriela glanced around the busy terminal. "Let's talk in the helicopter." They walked across the tarmac to a sleek blue and white helicopter. Once inside, Gabriela began her pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency. "My daughter was an environmental journalist," she said abruptly, eyes fixed on the control panel. "Isabel. 2 years ago, she was investigating corporate cover-ups of toxic waste dumping. She mentioned a man named Pierce who was helping whistleblowers." Eleanor's heart quickened. "What happened to her?" "Car accident, brake lines cut. Police called it a tragic mechanical failure." Her voice was flat, stripped of emotion through repeated telling. "She was getting close to something big involving a company called Sentinel Environmental. Sentinel is trying to seize my husband's property," Eleanor said quietly. "Then we'd better hurry." The helicopter lifted smoothly, banking toward the mountains rising in the distance. As they gained altitude, Gabriela handed Eleanor a headset to communicate over the rotor noise. "Your coordinates lead to a valley about 40 minutes from here," Gabriela said. "Isolated place. Locals call it Pinewood Valley because of the dark pines that surround it." The landscape below transformed from small towns and farmland to rugged wilderness. Pine forests gave way to rocky outcroppings, the winter landscape painting the mountainsides in stark whites and deep greens. "Did you ever try to find out what your daughter was investigating?" Eleanor asked. "Every day for 2 years," Gabriela replied. "I've hit nothing but dead ends and warnings to stop asking questions." She adjusted their course slightly. "We're approaching the coordinates. Pinewood Valley is just beyond this ridge." The helicopter crested the mountain, and suddenly the valley spread before them. Eleanor gasped. From above, the devastation was shocking. What must have once been a small community lay in ruins. Rectangular concrete foundations, 47 of them precisely arranged, stretched across the valley floor. All structures had been razed, leaving only the footprints of buildings beneath a thin layer of snow. "My God," Eleanor whispered. "What happened here?" Gabriela circled lower. This wasn't a natural disaster. Look at the pattern of destruction. Too clean, too complete. This was controlled demolition. At the center of the devastated community stood a single large building, still intact. Unlike the home foundations, this structure was built into the hillside, partially underground. A gravel road wound from this central building to what appeared to be a landing pad. "Can we set down there?" Eleanor pointed to the landing area. Gabriela nodded. As they touched down, Eleanor noticed solar panels glinting on the central building's roof. Someone was maintaining power. The landing pad had been recently cleared of snow. "This doesn't look abandoned," Gabriella observed as they removed their headsets. The silence was profound after the helicopter's noise. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of snow beneath their boots as they made their way toward the main building. Each concrete foundation they passed told the same story. Homes destroyed with surgical precision, leaving nothing but flat slabs. No debris, no remnants, just empty rectangles marking where people had once lived. "This wasn't just property," Eleanor said. "This was a community." As they approached the central building, a security camera mounted above the entrance swiveled to track their movement. Beside the heavy steel door was a keypad waiting for a code. Eleanor removed the envelope Franklin Reynolds had given her. Inside was a sequence of numbers and letters. Today's code, 7HVA22 Sanon, promise. Her hands trembled as she entered the sequence. For 20 years, she had kept her promise to never come here. Now, breaking that vow might be the only way to honor Thomas's memory. The keypad flashed green. The heavy door unlocked with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, motion-activated lights flickered on, illuminating a corridor that sloped gently downward into the hillside. The air was surprisingly fresh for an underground facility, suggesting an advanced ventilation system. "Someone's maintaining this place," Gabriella observed. "No dust, no cobwebs." The walls were lined with framed architectural drawings, all in Thomas's distinctive style. Each showed different aspects of the facility: living quarters, medical facilities, hydroponic gardens. "He designed all of this," Eleanor murmured. "This was his life's work, and I never knew." The corridor opened into a circular control room dominated by a horseshoe-shaped desk with multiple computer monitors. All were dark except one, which displayed a pulsing message. "Identity confirmed. Eleanor Pierce. Access granted to primary protocols." Beneath the message was a simple prompt: "Play final message." Eleanor took a deep breath and pressed yes. The monitors around the room suddenly illuminated, each showing the same image: Thomas sitting in what appeared to be this very room. He looked tired, his normally neat appearance slightly disheveled. The timestamp showed the recording was made just 10 days earlier. "Eleanor," he began, "if you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you've broken your promise to never come here. Thank you for that. Some promises are meant to be broken when the cost of keeping them becomes too high." He shifted in his chair, running a hand through his gray hair, a gesture so familiar it made Eleanor's heart ache. "I need to tell you a story that began 25 years ago, 5 years before we met. I was a young architect working on a corporate campus for Sentinel Industries in Texas. During construction, one of the workers, Carlos Ramirez, discovered documents proving the company was secretly dumping chemicals that were poisoning a nearby community. The screen split to show photographs of a Latino family, a man, woman, and 2 small children. Carlos and his wife Maria came to me because I had access to the building plans. They needed a safe place to copy documents before going to authorities. I helped them, naively thinking the system would protect them." Thomas's expression darkened. 3 days later, their house burned down with them inside. The police called it an electrical fire. Their children survived only because they were staying with an aunt that night. Eleanor gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. "I knew it wasn't an accident. The documents Carlos had gathered disappeared from his workplace locker. The investigation was closed in record time, and the company executive who had been implicated received a promotion the following month." Thomas leaned forward. "I couldn't let it go, Eleanor. I tracked down the Ramirez children, Anna and James. Their aunt was terrified, convinced the fire had been deliberate. I used my savings to help them relocate, create new identities, and I made a promise to myself that I would create a place where people like the Ramirez family could be safe. Have you ever discovered an unexpected truth about someone you thought you knew completely?" Sometimes the biggest secrets are hidden right before our eyes. Share your experience in the comments below. The screen changed to show architectural plans dated 1999, the initial design for Pinewood Ranch. I purchased this land through shell companies, designed the community to be self-sufficient and secure. Over time, it evolved into a sanctuary for whistleblowers, witnesses, and others targeted by powerful interests. For 25 years, we've helped people rebuild their lives until it was safe for them to re-enter society, or in some cases, provided a permanent home for those who could never safely emerge. Images flashed across the screens, families gardening together, children playing in what appeared to be an underground school, medical facilities where injured people were being treated. When we met, I was already 5 years into this project. I fell in love with you instantly, Eleanor, but I was terrified that my work would put you in danger. That's why I asked for your promise never to come here. I wanted to keep these two worlds separate, to protect both you and the people who depended on me. Thomas's face filled all the screens again, his expression pained. Every month when I told you I was checking on investments, I was coming here. Every secret phone call, every encrypted email, it was all to protect these people, and I hated lying to you. It has been the greatest regret of my life, creating this distance between us. He paused, swallowing hard. Pinewood Ranch is just one of 12 sanctuaries across the country. Each operates independently, but we coordinate to relocate people when necessary. Over the years, Sentinel Environmental, a company that evolved from Sentinel Industries, has systematically targeted these sanctuaries. The screen showed satellite images of the valley, timestamps indicating they were taken over the past 3 years. 3 years ago, they discovered this location. They couldn't move against us directly. Too many questions would be raised. So they began a campaign of psychological warfare. First, legal challenges about water rights and property boundaries, then mysterious accidents befalling our supply deliveries. Finally, they started targeting our founders and supporters. His voice grew grim. 6 months ago, they began systematically destroying the residential structures, always when they were empty, always with perfect precision. It was a message. We can reach you anytime. We evacuated most residents to other sanctuaries, keeping only the central facility operational. Thomas reached for something off camera, returning with a medical device. Eleanor recognized a pacemaker similar to the one he'd had implanted 2 years earlier after a minor heart episode. Last month, I discovered something terrifying. 3 other sanctuary founders died of sudden cardiac events within weeks of each other. All had cardiac devices from the same manufacturer. All deaths were ruled natural causes. He held up the pacemaker. These devices can be remotely accessed for monitoring. In the wrong hands, that access can be weaponized. Eleanor felt her blood run cold. Thomas's sudden death during his morning run. His heart simply stopped. I've been gathering evidence, preparing a case to expose everything, but I fear I've run out of time. His expression softened. Eleanor, my love, I'm so sorry to leave you with this burden. In the evidence room down the hall, you'll find everything I've collected. The people who were living here have been relocated, but they're still in danger. Sentinel won't stop until all evidence of their crimes is destroyed and every witness is silenced. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. I love you more than anything in this world. Forgive me for the secrets. Whatever you decide to do with this information, expose it, walk away, continue the work. I will understand. This was my fight, not yours. But it became the most important work of my life, and I couldn't abandon these people. The image froze on Thomas's face, then faded to black. A message appeared. Additional files accessible from main terminal. Eleanor stood motionless, tears streaming down her face. The man she had loved for 20 years had lived a double life. Not of betrayal, but of profound courage. He had built a refuge for the hunted, protected the vulnerable, and ultimately given his life for them. Gabriella's voice broke the silence. Your husband was trying to help people like my Isabel. Her voice cracked. She was trying to expose Sentinel, too. Eleanor wiped her tears. Thomas said there's an evidence room. Let's find it. As they turned to leave the control room, a red light began flashing on one of the monitors. A security alert scrolled across the screen. Perimeter breach detected. Vehicle approaching from the North Access Road. Is there a security system? Gabriella asked. Eleanor quickly returned to the main computer, finding a menu labeled Security. A click revealed multiple camera views of the property. On the North Road, a black luxury SUV was making its way toward the central facility. Can you tell who it is? Gabriella asked. No, but they're using the access road, not coming in secretly. Before she could act, another alert flashed. Vehicle recognized. Authorized personnel. They're expected? Gabriella's tone was skeptical. A man's voice came from the doorway. I've been waiting for you, Mrs. Pierce. Eleanor and Gabriella turned to find an elderly Native American man standing there. His weathered face and calloused hands spoke of a lifetime of physical work, but his eyes were sharp and assessing. I'm Robert Eagle Spirit, he said. I maintain the physical systems here. When the security system notified me that Eleanor Pierce had arrived, I came as quickly as I could. You knew Thomas? Eleanor asked. Robert nodded solemnly. For 23 years, he saved my life and many others. He gestured down the hallway. Come, there's much you need to see before our visitor arrives. Robert led them deeper into the facility to a heavy door marked simply Archives. He entered a code, and the door swung open to reveal what looked like a war room from a spy movie. Maps covered the walls with pins and strings connecting various locations. Filing cabinets lined one wall, while a large table in the center held stacks of organized documents. Thomas called this his evidence room, Robert explained. Everything he gathered about Sentinel's crimes is here. He was preparing to release it all when he trailed off. When they killed him, Eleanor finished softly, by hacking his pacemaker. Robert nodded grimly. The same method they used on 3 other sanctuary founders. Untraceable, looks like natural causes. The perfect crime. Eleanor approached the central table where a thick binder lay open. The label on its spine read simply, The Kill Pattern. What is this? She asked. The evidence he compiled about how Sentinel systematically destroys sanctuaries and eliminates witnesses, Robert replied. It's all there. Their methodology, their shell companies, the people involved. As Eleanor turned the pages, the horrifying scope of Sentinel's operations became clear. This wasn't just about silencing a few whistleblowers. It was a sophisticated operation to eliminate anyone who threatened their corporate interests. How many people still depend on this sanctuary network? She asked. 34, Robert replied. Most were relocated when the systematic destruction began, but these 34 cannot risk moving again. Their cases are too high profile, their identities too easily tracked. They remain connected to the sanctuary network, but are dispersed in safe locations nearby. He turned to Eleanor, his expression grave. Thomas always said if anything happened to him, you would come. He believed in you completely. I didn't even know this place existed until yesterday, Eleanor admitted. He said you had the strongest moral compass of anyone he'd ever known. That once you understood what was at stake, you would do the right thing. No matter how difficult, the security system chimed again. Our visitor has arrived, Robert said. I believe you're about to meet Catherine Reynolds. Reynolds? Like Franklin Reynolds, Thomas's lawyer? His sister, and the chief operating officer of Sentinel Environmental. Through the security cameras, Eleanor watched a woman in her early 60s exit the SUV. She moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to power, her silver hair perfectly styled beneath a cashmere hat, her coat clearly expensive. She's coming alone? Eleanor asked. Catherine always handles the most sensitive matters personally, Robert explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. She was an environmental activist once, before her son died from pollution-related illness 20 years ago. Now she's the architect of Sentinel's most ruthless campaigns. Why would an environmental activist join the company responsible for toxic dumping? Gabriella asked. Grief can transform people, Robert said quietly, sometimes into the very thing they once fought against. A notification appeared on the screen. Catherine Reynolds requesting entry. Eleanor straightened her shoulders. Let her in. I want to meet the woman who had my husband killed. Catherine Reynolds entered the control room with the ease of someone familiar with the space. Her tailored suit and perfectly styled hair stood in stark contrast to Eleanor's travel-worn appearance. Yet it was Eleanor who controlled the room, seated at Thomas's desk with Gabriella and Robert flanking her. Mrs. Pierce, Catherine began, her voice cultured and surprisingly warm. First, let me offer my condolences on your husband's passing. Thomas was a brilliant man. A brilliant man whose heart device was hacked by your company, Eleanor replied. Catherine smiled thinly. That's quite an extraordinary claim, one that would be exceptionally difficult to prove in any court. We're not in court, Gabriella interjected. Yet, Catherine's gaze shifted briefly to Gabriella, then back to Eleanor. I understand emotions are running high. That's precisely why I wanted to speak with you directly. There's a solution here that can benefit everyone. I'm listening, Eleanor said. Sentinel is prepared to establish a foundation in your husband's name, the Thomas Pierce Environmental Justice Fund. Initial funding of $250 million with another $50 million annually for the next decade. The foundation would support environmental protection initiatives, whistleblower protection programs, and community health monitoring in areas affected by industrial activity. She continued smoothly. Additionally, we're prepared to offer lifetime financial support to the individuals currently under your husband's protection. New identities, relocation to countries beyond our reach, comfortable stipends for life, no pursuit, no questions asked. In exchange for what? Eleanor asked, though she already knew the answer. All evidence, all records, complete confidentiality agreements, and the sanctuaries themselves for proper environmental remediation. Catherine smiled. Your husband created something admirable, Mrs. Pierce, but ultimately unsustainable. People can't live in hiding forever. We're offering them, and you, a way out. Clean, simple, financially secure. And if I refuse, then the legal machinery already in motion will continue. The sanctuaries will be seized through entirely legal means. The evidence, which would be inadmissible in court due to how it was obtained, will be lost in the process. And the people your husband was protecting will remain in perpetual danger, moving from safe house to safe house until they make a mistake, as they inevitably will. She leaned forward. Thomas understood the reality of power, Mrs. Pierce. That's why he created this elaborate network in the first place. He knew that conventional channels offered no real protection against organizations like Sentinel. I'm simply offering you a more humane resolution than the one that's currently unfolding. Eleanor studied Catherine's face. You murdered my husband. I had nothing to do with Thomas's tragic passing, Catherine replied, but I understand why you might want someone to blame. And Isabel Morales, Gabriella asked, her voice tight with fury. My daughter whose brake lines were cut. Was that a tragic passing too? I'm not familiar with that name. Liar, Gabriella hissed. Catherine turned back to Eleanor. The offer is time-limited, Mrs. Pierce. Sentinel's board meets tomorrow at noon to finalize our approach to this situation. I've advocated for this generous solution. Others prefer more conventional remedies. She stood, straightening her already immaculate suit. You have until noon tomorrow to decide. She placed a business card on top of a portfolio. My private number. Call me when you've made your decision. After Robert escorted Catherine out, Eleanor examined the documents she'd left behind. The offer was meticulously detailed. The foundation structure, the financial arrangements for survivors, the confidentiality terms. They've been planning this since before Thomas died, Eleanor observed. It's blood money, Gabriella said flatly. Robert returned, his expression grim. She's gone, but we detected additional vehicles on the perimeter during her visit. They're watching the facility. A red light began flashing on one of the monitors. Robert rushed to check it. We have multiple security breaches, he announced. Not just physical entry. Our systems are under cyber attack. On one screen, a countdown appeared. 24 mission, ticking down second by second. What is that? Eleanor asked. A data purge protocol, Robert explained. A safety feature Thomas built in case the sanctuary was compromised. It would erase all digital evidence and sever connections to the survivor network. Can you stop it? I've slowed it down, but I can't stop it completely. We have 24 hours before the automatic purge completes. A second countdown appeared on another screen. 36, Sorrow. And that one? Legal seizure. Sentinel has obtained emergency remediation authority. Their crews arrive at dawn Monday to take possession of the property. In 36 hours, they'll be legally authorized to bulldoze everything, Gabriella muttered. There's more, Robert said gravely. We've intercepted communications indicating Sentinel has located several of the survivors' safe houses. They're moving teams into position now. How many survivors are at immediate risk? Eleanor demanded. At least 12 have been compromised. The others are in danger if they attempt to relocate. Eleanor stared at the 3 countdowns, each representing a different aspect of the same existential threat. The purge would complete in 24 hours. Sentinel's legal seizure would begin in 36 hours. And somewhere across the western states, Sentinel teams were closing in on people whose only crime had been telling the truth. She walked to a photograph on the wall. Thomas surrounded by children in what appeared to be the sanctuary's classroom. His face was alight with joy as the children showed him art projects and science experiments. He came alive when he was here, Robert said. He told me once that while he loved his public life as an architect, his real purpose was building places where truth could safely exist. Eleanor touched the image of her husband's smiling face. I never knew this side of him. He protected you by keeping you separate from this world, Robert replied. But he also said that if the day ever came when worlds had to collide, you would be the strongest ally the Sanctuary Network could possibly have. I'm not sure I'm as strong as he believed. We're about to find out, Robert said. The communications center is this way. It's time you met the survivors. Sometimes we find our greatest strength in moments when we feel most vulnerable. When have you faced the hardest decision of your life? How did you find the strength to overcome it? Share your story in the comments. The communications center occupied what had once been a large classroom. Rows of desks had been pushed aside to make room for a circular arrangement of screens and equipment. Robert worked quickly, activating systems and establishing secure connections. Each survivor has a secure communication device, he explained. They'll connect through encrypted channels that bounce signals through multiple servers. It makes their locations untraceable. The screens flickered to life one by one, each displaying a face. Some clearly visible, others partially shadowed or shown only in silhouette. 34 windows, 34 people whose lives depended on the sanctuary network Thomas had built. These are the remaining high-risk survivors, Robert explained quietly to Eleanor. Scientists, engineers, former employees, witnesses, all with evidence against Sentinel that could destroy the company if it came to light. An older woman's face appeared on the central screen, her silver hair pulled back severely, her expression grave but kind. Robert, we've been waiting, she said. Is it true? Is Eleanor Pierce with you? Yes, Martha, Robert replied. Eleanor, this is my wife, Martha Eagle Spirit. She coordinates communication between survivors. Martha's eyes locked onto Eleanor through the screen. Thomas spoke of you often. He was so careful to keep you safe from all of this. She gestured to encompass the sanctuary system. We hoped we would never need to meet like this. I wish we were meeting under different circumstances, Eleanor replied. I'm still trying to understand everything Thomas built and everything he was fighting against. Then let us help you understand, Martha said. She turned to address the other screens. Friends, this is Eleanor Pierce. As Thomas outlined in our emergency protocols, she must decide the future of the Sanctuary Network and the evidence we've gathered. But first, she needs to hear from us. One by one, survivors began to speak. A chemical engineer described discovering toxic contamination in groundwater near a Sentinel facility, being fired when he reported it, then finding his home vandalized and his children threatened. A financial analyst detailed massive fraud in Sentinel's environmental remediation contracts, with taxpayers paying for cleanups that never happened. A former security guard recounted witnessing company executives ordering the destruction of evidence before a regulatory inspection. Each story followed a similar dark pattern: discovery of wrongdoing, attempts to report it through proper channels, then escalating retaliation that eventually forced them into hiding. A young woman speaking from a dimly lit room caught Eleanor's particular attention. My name is Ana Ramirez, she said. My parents were Carlos and Maria Ramirez, killed 25 years ago after my father discovered Sentinel's illegal dumping. Eleanor recognized the name from Thomas's video. You're one of the children he helped. Ana nodded. I was 7 when Mr. Pierce helped my aunt relocate us. He created new identities for us and paid for our education. When I grew up, I became an environmental lawyer to fight companies like Sentinel. 3 years ago, when they connected me to my real identity, I had to disappear into the Sanctuary Network. Your brother James. He works for Sentinel now, Ana said, pain evident in her voice. He believes our parents' death was an accident and that I'm paranoid. We haven't spoken in years. The stories continued until Martha called for a vote. 3 options, she said. 1, we destroy all evidence and disappear deeper, abandoning the sanctuaries but preserving our safety. 2, we turn everything over to federal authorities and hope for protection. 3, we fight back with a coordinated public exposure of Sentinel's crimes. One by one, the survivors cast their votes. Despite the different risks each faced, the result was unanimous, 34-0 for option 3. Ana Ramirez spoke for the group. We've been hiding for too long. I spent 25 years in the shadows because of what my father discovered. I don't want to spend the next 25 the same way. None of us do. An older man added, I haven't seen my grandchildren in 7 years. I want them to know I didn't run because I was guilty. I ran because I was right. But the risks, Eleanor began. We understand the risks better than anyone, Martha interrupted. We've lived with them every day. But there comes a point when hiding becomes its own prison. Eleanor looked at these faces, some clear, some shadowed, all carrying the burden of truths too dangerous to tell. In their eyes, she saw the same courage that must have driven Thomas all these years. If we do this, she said slowly, we need a plan that protects all of you. Thomas believed you would find a way, Martha said simply. Through the night and into the next day, they worked tirelessly on their counteroffensive. Eleanor, drawing on her academic experience, organized the evidence into compelling narratives tailored for different journalists. Robert handled the technical aspects, preparing secure channels for simultaneous distribution. Gabriella coordinated with trusted contacts from her daughter's network of environmental journalists. By morning, they were ready. The data purge countdown showed just 2 hours remaining. Whatever they didn't save in the next 120 minutes would be permanently lost. It's time to activate the dead man's switch, Robert said. Eleanor placed her palm on the biometric scanner. The system hummed, then flashed green with a message. Primary authentication accepted. Secondary authentication required. What's the secondary authentication? Eleanor asked. The system prompted, please answer the authentication question. Where did you first say I love you to Thomas Pierce? Eleanor smiled despite her exhaustion. The Morgan Library in New York, third floor rare manuscript room in front of a first edition of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. The system processed her answer, then displayed, authentication complete, dead man switch active, 47 information packages prepared for distribution, awaiting final command. 47 journalists in 28 countries, Robert explained. Each will receive a unique portion of the evidence, ensuring no single person has the complete picture, but collectively, they have everything. Eleanor turned to the assembled survivors on the video screens. Is everyone in position? One by one, they confirmed their readiness. Some looked afraid, others determined, all committed to the plan they had created together. Then let's begin, Eleanor said. She lifted her phone and dialed the number Catherine Reynolds had left. Catherine answered on the first ring. Mrs. Pierce, have you reached a decision? I have, Eleanor replied. I'd like to meet to discuss the terms of your offer. I'm pleased to hear that, Catherine said. Shall we say 8 a.m. at your facility? I can bring the final paperwork. Actually, I was thinking of somewhere more public. The Grand Summit Hotel in Sheridan. Their restaurant serves an excellent breakfast. A pause. That's unusual but acceptable. 8 a.m. in the main restaurant. One more thing, Eleanor added. I'll be bringing a guest, Gabriela Morales. I believe her daughter Isabel's case should be included in our agreement. Of course, whatever brings this matter to a satisfactory conclusion. The Grand Summit Hotel's restaurant buzzed with the usual morning activity, business travelers having meetings over coffee, tourists planning their day in the mountains. Eleanor and Gabriela sat at a table near the windows, offering a clear view of the parking lot and entrance. At precisely 8 a.m., Catherine Reynolds entered, accompanied by two men in dark suits who took positions near the door. She approached Eleanor's table with a professional smile, leather portfolio in hand. Mrs. Pierce, Ms. Morales, thank you for meeting me. She sat gracefully. I'm glad we could arrange this civilized discussion. Civilized, Gabriela repeated. An interesting word choice. Catherine ignored the comment, turning to Eleanor. I trust you've reviewed the documents I provided. The terms are quite generous. I have, Eleanor replied, and I have some questions about the specifics. But first, I'd like to clarify something. She placed her phone on the table, screen facing up. This conversation is being recorded. I hope that's not a problem. Catherine's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I don't see why it would be, though it does suggest a certain lack of trust. Trust should be earned, Ms. Reynolds. Sentinel hasn't done much to earn mine. For the next 20 minutes, Eleanor methodically questioned Catherine about specific provisions in the agreement, particularly those related to the oversight of the proposed foundation. Catherine answered each question with practiced ease, clearly pleased with the direction of the conversation. Now, Eleanor said, checking her watch, there's the matter of timing. How quickly could funds be made available to relocate the current sanctuary residents? Immediately, Catherine assured her. We have resources standing by. The sooner we resolve this situation, the better for all involved. I agree completely, Eleanor said. She glanced at her phone, then turned the screen toward Catherine. On it was a simple display, year 0022, counting down. In 22 seconds, 47 journalists around the world will simultaneously receive portions of my husband's evidence against Sentinel. Each package is unique, containing different aspects of your company's crimes. Collectively, they tell the complete story. You're bluffing, Catherine said, though her face had paled. The New York Times, The Guardian, Le Monde, Der Spiegel, Al Jazeera, the Sydney Morning Herald, Eleanor recited calmly, plus 41 others, all receiving their packages in, she checked the phone, 9 seconds. Catherine glanced toward her security men, who had tensed visibly. Whatever you think you're doing, it won't work. Those journalists will need to verify everything. Their legal departments will take weeks to approve publication. Perhaps, Eleanor conceded, but the evidence is quite compelling and very specific. The medical records show your HeartGuard program developing methods to remotely manipulate cardiac devices. The financial trails connecting Sentinel to 11 accidental deaths of sanctuary founders. The profit analyses showing how much money you've made destroying properties like Pinewood Ranch. The countdown reached 0. It's done, Eleanor said. As if on cue, Catherine's phone began buzzing insistently. She glanced at it, her expression hardening as she saw the cascade of incoming messages. You've made an enemy today, she said, her voice low. No, Eleanor corrected. I've exposed one that already existed. Catherine stood abruptly. For a moment she seemed about to say something more, but instead turned and walked briskly toward the exit. At the door she paused and looked back at Eleanor, her face a mask of cold fury. This isn't over, Mrs. Pierce. Actually, Ms. Reynolds, Gabriella called after her. For you, it is. 6 months later, Eleanor stood in the restored Pinewood Valley, watching as construction crews worked on new foundations. The spring air carried the scent of fresh-cut lumber and possibility. Where once stood a hidden sanctuary, a vibrant community was emerging in the open. Homes and facilities for people who no longer needed to hide. Hard to believe it's the same place, Gabriella remarked. She had become a constant presence in Eleanor's life, their shared purpose forging a bond that transcended their different backgrounds. The months since their confrontation with Catherine Reynolds had unfolded with dizzying speed. The coordinated release of evidence to journalists worldwide had created precisely the avalanche effect they'd hoped for. Major news outlets had broken the story simultaneously, making it impossible for Sentinel to contain. The most damaging revelations had come from the medical evidence. 3 independent experts confirmed that the HeartGuard program had developed methods to remotely manipulate cardiac devices in ways that could cause fatal malfunctions. Within weeks, Sentinel's stock had collapsed, and the company had filed for bankruptcy protection. Its assets were being sold off, with a substantial portion placed in a court-supervised fund for victim compensation. Criminal charges had been filed against 17 Sentinel executives. Catherine Reynolds had been arrested but released on bail pending trial. 3 weeks later, she was found dead in her home, in apparent suicide. She had left a letter addressed to Eleanor. I began with ideals like Thomas, but grief transformed me into what I once fought against. Build a better legacy than I did. Eleanor had wept when she read those words, understanding the thin line between heroism and villainy, how easily pain could twist good intentions. The Pierce Foundation, established with Thomas's life insurance money, now owned the Pinewood Valley land. Its mission was transforming the former sanctuary into a research and education center focused on corporate accountability and environmental justice. Eleanor walked toward her new home, a small cabin overlooking the valley. Unlike the grand house in Boston she had shared with Thomas, this place was modest but warm, with large windows that bathed the rooms in natural light. Her favorite space was the library, where she had placed Thomas's architectural models alongside photographs of the sanctuary residents. In a quiet corner of the main building, they had preserved Thomas's evidence room as a historical archive. Researchers and journalists could access it by appointment, studying the meticulous documentation of corporate crimes and the sanctuary network's response. Nearby, a memorial garden honored those who hadn't lived to see this day. Thomas, Isabel, and others who had died protecting the truth. Their stories would be taught in the education center, ensuring future generations understood the cost of the sanctuary network. As evening approached, residents and construction workers began gathering for the weekly community dinner, a tradition carried over from the sanctuary days. Tables were set up in the open air. Robert and Martha Eagle Spirit would be leading tonight's gathering. The sun began to set behind the Bighorn Mountains, painting the valley in gold and purple. Construction equipment stood silhouetted against the blazing sky, frames of new homes promising a future where truth could thrive in daylight. Eleanor stood on her cabin porch, a cup of tea warming her hands as she watched the community gather below. She thought of Thomas, of the secret life he had lived, and of the legacy he had entrusted to her. In the distance, she could hear children laughing, their voices carrying on the clear mountain air. "It's not what you originally built," she whispered to Thomas's memory, "but I think it's what you always hoped for." The evening star appeared in the darkening sky, the first light of night, guiding those who had once lived in shadows safely home. "Not a hiding place," Eleanor murmured, "but a beacon."